I thought they would just get an unwanted baby from a single mother. I only wanted to be with him. I never dreamed they would go to such lengths," the woman wailed. 7 months after a young mother who vanished without a trace was found buried in a field. And her son, only 70 days old, gone missing. This is the twisted case of a masterful liar with remarkable acting skills, who paid for the kidnapping of an infant. And destroyed 3 families, just to marry a rich man she was obsessed with. The shocking details of the murder of the 21-year-old woman, found buried about a month after she went missing with her newborn son, and which remained unsolved for 7 months with no leads and no witnesses, came to light purely by chance in January 2005 when the police chased and caught a driver fleeing a traffic stop. According to what their investigation uncovered, this case all began with a woman's dissatisfaction with her marriage. Kim, aged 38 and mother of 2 children, started going to nightclubs to escape the daily grind, finding the repetitive routine of her life and marriage tedious, and she often fought bitterly with her husband of 13 years who brought home little money. In 2003, she met Choi, a 33-year-old man, at a club, and this would change the course of her life forever. Falling head over heels for the good-looking younger man who came from a wealthy family, a great catch who could give her the kind of life she wanted. She left her husband and children and moved in with the man in May, 2 months into their passionate affair. Their relationship, however, began with Kim utterly deceiving the man, hiding the fact that she was still married with 2 children. Her obsession with this younger man knew no bounds, and all she wanted was to become his wife. But he gave no indication of wanting to get married, and she began to think the only way was to baby trap him. Lying that she was pregnant, she demanded marriage and he proposed, but there was one tiny problem. She was no longer capable of having children. Her heart sank every time he asked her why she remained so slim and did not look pregnant. Panicking that he would leave her if he found out about her fake pregnancy, and that she would not be able to deceive him much longer, she came up with a daring plan. All the while trying to gain weight by constantly gorging herself on junk food. First, she decided to get an infant from a shelter for single mothers, thinking she could surely find someone who didn't want her baby. But after being turned away repeatedly, she turned to a troubleshooter who performs minor services for a fee, and told him, "I need a baby fast, get me one." "That's a very unusual request, so it's gonna cost you. A boy or a girl?" Jong, the troubleshooter asked. "Doesn't matter. Any will do, as long as it's a newborn," she answered. She promised an advance payment of 40 million Korean won, or about $30,000 to search for a newborn, and an additional $22,500 if he was successful. Jong, who was heavily in debt, took the money, finding her offer too tempting to turn down. A month later in November 2003, she married Choi in a small wedding ceremony. With only family and close friends present at her insistence. She could not invite anyone she knew because she still had not divorced her husband. So she hired total strangers to pretend to be her friends and her family members, whom she claimed came over for her wedding from the United States where they lived. Jong, the troubleshooter, was also there, posing as her uncle. In February 2004, 3 months after the wedding, knowing her husband would not be fooled much longer, she told him she wanted to give birth in the United States under the care of her parents. Went to the airport, waved goodbye to her husband, then turned around, and went to stay at a friend's house. Her in-laws gave her a large sum of money to pay for the costs of what they thought would be her first childbirth, and she used this as the down payment for her scheme to get a newborn. About a month later in late March, Kim returned alone, supposedly from the United States, claiming she had given birth to a son, and assured her husband that her uncle would bring their son as soon as it was safe for him to travel. One can only assume she was a truly superb actor and liar, or the man extremely gullible. But in any case, is it really possible that a husband can fail to realize his wife is not really pregnant, and believe she actually gave birth to his child? In the meantime, the troubleshooter was struggling in vain to get his hands on an infant, and desperate for money to pay off his gambling debts, he enlisted his brother-in-law and a friend in the endeavor to get hold of a newborn. Easier said than done. For 6 months, the trio roamed around the country to orphanages, daycare centers, and maternity hospitals, but getting a baby proved impossible. As the agreed deadline approached, they grew impatient and decided on abduction. On the 24th of May, the trio, while driving around Pyeongtaek, a city about 60 kilometers from Seoul, the capital of South Korea, spotted a woman walking with an infant in her arms, shoved her into their car, and Jong took off alone with the baby. Later that day, Kim's husband answered the doorbell to find his wife's uncle with a baby in his arms. "My baby. Finally," the husband exclaimed. Meanwhile, after Jong snatched the baby from the young mother and left for his client's home, his two partners in crime strangled her in the car as she fought them desperately for her son. They drove around for a day with her body in the trunk before traveling more than 100 kilometers to bury her in a remote field. At first, it seemed they had pulled off a perfect crime. Kim was enjoying wedded bliss, perfectly masquerading as a mother with a newborn son, and no longer worrying herself sick, but her happiness was short-lived. The three men began to blackmail her for more money, threatening to tell her husband. "How can you be so happy when we are suffering from guilt every day?" they told her. Kim had no choice but to give in to their demands, and they extorted more than $160,000 from her over 5 separate occasions. Coincidentally, it was a hit-and-run accident that Jong's brother-in-law and friend caused that led to their arrests. On the 22nd of January 2005, the police were conducting a traffic stop in search of the car that fled the scene of the accident. And the two men drove off in panic as soon as they saw the police. The police persistently gave chase, caught, and searched their car, which was caked with dirt, and had muddy shovels and gloves scattered around in the trunk, as well as a broken cell phone without a battery. The driver claimed that the phone belonged to a woman he met only once and he knew nothing about her. The detective in charge had the phone repaired, found 13 saved numbers, and began calling each number one by one. Finally, a woman answered his call, but sounded very suspicious and even scared when the detective said he was trying to find the owner of the phone. "Who are you, and why are you using this phone?" she asked. After verifying that he was indeed a detective, the woman said, "Don't you know the owner of the phone is dead? She is my friend who was found murdered in last June, and her son is still missing." The police, certain that the driver and his friend were involved in this crime, immediately interrogated them about what they'd done with the baby, and they confessed everything. In the early morning hours of the next day, the police raided Kim's home under heavy security for the baby's safety, and found the baby healthy, up to date on all necessary vaccinations, and all of the baby products in her home were expensive luxury brands. Leaving her dumbfounded husband behind, Kim was taken into custody, and the stolen child was returned to his overjoyed father under police escort. "I wanted an abandoned child from a single mother, this wasn't what I wanted," she told the police, adding, "I only wanted to be with him. I never dreamed they would go to such lengths." Jong and the two others also stated that they didn't plan to kill the child's mother, but accidentally killed her because she fought back so fiercely. The court sentenced Jong's brother-in-law and friend to life imprisonment for directly committing the murder. And the two later appealed, but their life sentences were upheld. Both Kim and Jong were sentenced to 5 years imprisonment, the former for soliciting abduction and the latter for participating in abduction. Even though they were the masterminds and root cause of this case, they could not be charged with solicitation to commit murder, as they did not directly ask the other two to kill someone, hence their light sentences. Jong's brother-in-law and friend are currently incarcerated. And Kim and Jong were released in 2009 after serving out their sentences. A woman who stopped at nothing to satisfy her selfish desires, and an immoral man corrupted by money, resulted in the tragedy of forever depriving a child of his mother and a husband of his wife. And imagine how the woman's second husband and in-laws would have felt to learn just how thoroughly they had been duped and betrayed. And that the child they'd loved as their own had been snatched from his real, murdered mother. Not to mention her legal first husband and 2 children whose wife and mother shattered 3 families. Thanks so much for watching.